I've always been a fan of the Fast and Furious movies, not so much maybe because of the script and acting.
We're a long way from home. This is Brazil!
But more so because of the cars that are in these movies. Because we have JDM cars, we have luxury cars, muscle cars, and of course we have a couple of hypercars in there. So what I want to do in this video, talk about my top 5 cars from the Fast and Furious movies based mostly on their design. So let's get into it. The first one, number 5 here, would be the Tokyo Drift RX-7. So this right here is the full Veilside package of the RX-7. And the reason I like this car right here, I've heard a lot of opinions about this kit. Some people think it's the most hideous thing they've ever seen in their life. Some people think it's a very, very cool set for the RX-7. I think this is a really cool aftermarket body kit for the RX-7. And the reason for that is, I think this set right here, it turns the RX-7 from a sports car into the proportions of a supercar because it makes it so much wider. You can see here, this underneath here is the original width or the original body of the RX-7. You can see just how much wider it is with this body kit. Another reason why I like this kit is because it's seriously one of the most well-engineered body kits I've ever seen, specifically wide body kits on any car. Because usually what happens when you have a wide body kit on a car, usually what happens is the company leaves kind of this just as it is, and then you just widen out the fenders super long right here in the front, and you have some super pronounced fenders in the front and the rear as well. So it doesn't really blend well with the overall design of the car, and I think that's what Veilside did really, really well here. I'm not a huge fan of the rear end here. It looks a little too simplistic for my taste and too kind of aftermarket body kit design in the rear end, but I'm gonna let that slide because of the overall engineering and body panel gaps in this body kit. So this is number 5. Now moving on to number 4, we have the 2002 Nissan Skyline GTR, and this is the R34, of course. This is my favorite Skyline or slash GTR of them all, this version of them. I do really like the silver one that's in I think Too Fast Too Furious with the blue graphics. I think the graphics on that car actually work really well with the overall design of the car. Usually I'm not a fan of stickers and stuff onto the cars, but that specific car, and it's a JDM car, so it's kind of part of their culture to have that type of graphics onto the car, and that is really not easy to pull off a good graphic for a car like this, and that's why I love the silver one as well. But if I had to choose one, it's gonna have to be Paul Walker's personal GTR, which I think this is it. I'm not sure this is the exact car that Paul Walker owned. This one at the top here, I'm not sure if these are the correct wheels, and these are other wheels as you can see right here. But I like both of these wheels. If I had to pick one, it would probably be this one right here, because these wheels are just perfectly suited for this Nissan GTR. And the Paul Walker one, the actual car that he owned, was sold for I think $1.3 million. If you're lucky to own one of these today, hold on to them, because these are skyrocketing right now in value, and they will only keep climbing in value as cars become more and more autonomous and specifically turning into EVs. There will always be a demand for these type of cars. The reason I like the R34 is I love this styling. It's kind of boxy design, which I'm a fan of, and it's a very purposeful design, this R34. And if I had to choose a color, it has to be the Bayside blue right here, with maybe these wheels in this color. So these wheels in the bronze finish would be probably the way I would set this R34 up. I wouldn't really call the R34, as I said just now, beautiful, but it's just purposeful. I think purposeful is the right word for these type of cars. The same with the new GTR as well. All right, moving on to number 3, and this is the only pictures I could find that were decent of this car. These is, as you can see, it's a model, scale model of this car. But this is the E39. It's M5. It was supposed to be an M5, but it's really not an M5 in the movie. It's a 540i. It's a 2001. So you have the facelifted headlights and taillights right here, which I think really bumps up the overall look of the E39. And to me, the E39 overall is one of the, it is the most beautiful 5 Series that BMW has ever made. I think it's a perfect proportions for a sedan of this size. And the reason I think this is such a cool Fast and Furious car is because it's so unexpected to have a E39 5 Series in a street race with Dom. So I think it's the Charger he races there or something like that. And to kind of see this treatment on an E39, it's unusual, but I kind of like it. The way you can see that the movie car isn't an M5, there are a bunch of signs you can look for in an M5 if you really want to know if it's an M5 or not. First of all, you have this air vent right here. Let's make this blue so you can see what I'm doing. This air vent on the side, and of course you have this front bumper, obviously, which is totally different from the regular 5 Series. You also have the wheels, which are specific for the M5. What's missing in the movie car is the side mirrors. It doesn't have the M5 more curved, rounded side mirrors like we have here. If you look at the movie car, it has the standard 5 Series or 540i in this case side mirrors, and that's how you can tell that it's not really an M5. And what's cool about the 540i is that it came in a manual. That would be a very cool car to have today. I think that as well would rise in value if you take care of it. To me, it's going back to the golden era of BMW, and you also have it with a V8, 286 horsepower, I think the 540 had, and you can have it with a manual stick. For maintenance costs, it's a lot cheaper to own than an M5. So the 540i with a 6-speed manual, the great choice for a daily driver if you're into the E39s. All right, going into number 2, we have the Koenigsegg CCXR. I have to take this into consideration here because it's a Swedish car. Not only that, in Sweden, it's not supposed to make cars like this, which is why I love Koenigsegg, because they're standing out so much from what we're used to seeing, the sensible, the logical Volvos and the Saabs of Sweden. And then Christian von Koenigsegg comes out and creates the Koenigsegg, and specifically this CCXR, which is in the final scenes of, I can't remember which movie it is, Fast 5 maybe, when the guy comes up with his Koenigsegg CCXR and he says, this is only 1 out of 4.
You know what's crazy? There's only 4 of those cars in the whole world.
I'm not sure which Koenigsegg model CCX he's referring to, because the CCXR was actually made in 9 examples, and the Trevita, which is Swedish for 3 whites, was actually just produced in obviously 3. And this was actually named one of the most beautiful cars of all time by Forbes magazine in 2009, I believe that was. And it is a beautiful car, and it's so un-Swedish, and that's what I love about it. In Sweden we have this word, it's lagom. It's the only language I've known to have this word, and lagom in Swedish means just right. It's not too much, it's not too little, it's just right in the middle, so it's lagom. That's kind of the Swedish overall mentality of things. You don't want to stick out too much in either direction, so to speak. And that's why, again, why I love Koenigsegg here, because they just slapped that Swedish mentality in the face and went out and created cars like this. And I have massive respect for Christian von Koenigsegg for actually producing and creating, designing his own dream car like this. And of course, Koenigsegg also has a very strong brand identity with this greenhouse right here, with this visor design in the front end, which you can see right here. Super stealthy. And now we have the Jesko Agera and so on, still following this tradition. You can still definitely tell that each Koenigsegg, it is nothing but a Koenigsegg, thanks to their super strong brand identity, which they've managed to create in a very, very short amount of time. Now, the number 1 in my book here. Some went to the mountaintops and screamed blasphemy when this car was shown in Tokyo Drift. Some thought it was the coolest car that's ever been featured in a Fast and Furious movie. I think I'm in the second group here as well. I think this is a super cool design, super cool idea. I get why people will be upset if you slap a RB26 twin-turbo Nissan engine in this Ford Mustang 67 Fastback here, but at the same time, it's a mix of 2 completely different cultures. You have the Japanese turbo, smaller engine, drift culture mixed with the American V8 massive engine, straight line performance, and when you mix those 2, this is what you get. This is of course, the Tokyo Drift 67 Fastback Mustang. And first of all, I think the 67 Mustang Fastback is if not one of the most beautiful cars of the 60s and of all time, coupes of all time. I love how these rear fenders here, they kind of frame the greenhouse, and how the greenhouse goes all the way down and never goes back up right here into this beautifully sculpted taillight section right here, which also framed beautifully like this. And on top of that, this goes in like this, so you have a curvature here where the taillight sits. And I made a full review of the 1967 Fastback here on the channel. I'm gonna link that down in the description so you can go and check that out if you want to, where I'll talk more about my love for this specific design here. So as I said, some people hate this car, but I can't hate it. I think it's such a cool idea to mix these 2 different car cultures into one car, and I think we need more experiments like that overall on the screen in general.